We know that there's recently been conversation, I think it was this past Wednesday, where we heard from Mark Shapiro at the Goldman Sachs conference, and he said something along the lines of, WWE is not where the UFC is yet on ticket yield. We have work to do there. We know we have a lot of room there because Vince McMahon was primarily pricing tickets for families and wasn't totally focused on maximizing the opportunity there. Now that we've seen what we can do with the UFC, we're replicating that in terms of ticket yield and holding back and advanced sales when it comes to on location on the WWE side. And it's working out really well. Eric, that's something I want to get your take on because, you know, this has historically been a family event. I don't think anybody ever really talked about MMA as if it were a family event. That's not to say that there weren't younger fans and things like that, but a lot of our listeners grew up going to the matches with their family. I mean, we just had a heartfelt comment earlier that Nitro was a big part of the way that that family celebrated their grandmother. If we're continuing to raise ticket prices, do you lose some of that? Does some of the, I don't know, the heart of wrestling? I mean, is it still going to be able to pull those emotional levers, I guess, if it becomes all about a cash grab, Eric?
In the short term, of course, no different. It'll be exciting as hell. But here, if I was in a meeting, a strategic planning meeting in WWE, and the subject came up, I would, when called upon, voice my concern about the longer term impact. Of course, in the short term, you're going to make more money as long as the market will bear it. You can keep raising prices until you finally find the point where you've gone too far. It's easy to figure that out. So much easy data is so much more easily assimilated now and aggregated to help you make decisions. But here's the long-term impact that I would be concerned about, and this is the point I would try to make, is that one of the reasons that professional wrestling as we know it in the United States, around the world, is been as successful as it has since the beginning of television time because it's family entertainment. It's a generational experience. Parents can take their kids and their kids' friends, and you could go to an event like WWE or AEW or TNA, and you could afford to bring your kids, and those kids are going to be adults someday who are going to bring their kids to share that experience. Very few other sports fall into that category. Baseball probably still does to a degree, but it's just, I mean, it's getting really, really expensive to go to an NFL game too. And, you know, just, it gets real expensive just to park your car. And God forbid you bring 3 or 4 kids with you and they all of a sudden get hungry. And then you're dropping $22 on a freaking hot dog, $9 on an 8-ounce cup of Pepsi or whatever. So my concern would be, great, you could keep pushing that envelope and you could probably in the short term continue to increase your revenues. But what happens 15 years from now when all of a sudden the kids that used to come to the events with their parents now have kids and they can't afford it? It's just too much. So that would be my concern. I think, again, I sound like a Vince McMahon agent here, but I think I would have voted with Vince on this one. I think you have to make a decision, in my opinion, to remain family friendly in the context of making it affordable so parents can bring their kids, and it's something that you can all enjoy together, because there's not a lot of that left. In fact, it's really funny. We were just talking about that today in my previous meeting about Real American Freestyle. You know, there's a reason why UFC isn't necessarily family friendly. Part of it has to do with how much it costs to go, you know, the ticket pricing, obviously. But it's also, you know, you hear things in those interviews post-fight that, you know, if you brought your 10-year-old kid, son or daughter, you're kind of getting an earful of stuff that you don't necessarily want your kids to hear at that age. And one of the things that we talked about with Real American Freestyle for our long-term brand building kind of strategy is to not only keep it affordable for families, but the presentation should be family friendly too. Not everything has to be F-bombs. Like, I get it. I was the one that initially decided to target 18 to 49-year-old men. And you do have to push the creative envelope and do things or allow things that you might not allow if your audience is a teen and a preteen audience. But when you get to the point where it's too expensive to bring your kids, and if you do spring for it, your kids are being exposed to things that you might not be comfortable with at their age. It's not a road that Real American Freestyle wants to go down for that very reason. Could we increase ticket prices and push the envelope a little bit? Sure, we could. Wouldn't be that hard, but it's not necessarily the right move, at least for us, for Real American Freestyle. But I even think for WWE, I would be concerned about the long-term implications of what this does to my audience 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now.
I do want to ask you, Raj, do you think that there might be a PR problem on the horizon here? I mean, I'm wondering how much further can WWE push the envelope before it does feel like there's some backlash? I mean, we've seen comments of even videos posted where fans just run into Nick Khan at Universal Studios or what have you, and they're addressing the pricing and are not able to afford to go to the matches anymore. But when you have the CEOs, the executive managers coming out and saying, we're kind of trying to price families out of the market. And, oh, by the way, WrestleMania is now going to Saudi Arabia. Do you think there's a potential PR storm brewing here, or am I reaching there?
Well, I think one of the issues has been, like, if you look over the decades, again, and this kind of goes back to Vince, ticket prices have just been going way, 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 way up. And, I'll see people compare, like AEW ticket sales to WCW, and they're saying, well, if you got accounted for inflation, you can't account for inflation only. You got to account for the change in ticket prices, because ticket prices are just a different monster today than they were, in the 90s. And I think Vince kept the prices lower than other forms of entertainment, especially the last 15 years. As Eric mentioned, going to a football game is just so much more expensive now than it was 30 years ago. Going to an NBA game. And WWE didn't really keep the pace of increasing prices with, in tune with those other forms of entertainment. And now you're seeing TKO making up for lost time. And it's such a drastic move that I think it is catching a lot of people, by shock. But, it's for a hot product and how much it costs. It's not that much more than other forms of entertainment. It's not much more, it's cheaper than an NBA ticket on average, way cheaper than NFL or UFC. And, it's one of those things where, and look, I'm not super corporate greedy or anything, but when you say ticket prices are too expensive, I hear what people are saying, but these shows are selling out, or you'd rather sell, it's kind of one of those things where do you rather sell 200 tickets for $100 or 500 tickets for $10, which makes you the more money, but they have these high ticket prices and they're selling out. So you can't really say at this point they're too expensive. Once you really start seeing people not going to the shows because of the ticket prices and those shows not selling out, that's when you could really say it's too expensive. But, back in the 90s, I remember in 95 going to a WWF house show. And I took 10 friends. No one watched wrestling then. The product was ice cold, but the tickets were like $20. So they're like, yeah, we'll go. They didn't know who anyone was at that point, but they had a good time. Now I can't do that. Now I'm not going to be able to get 10 people to spend $100 for, if they're not familiar with the product. So it is different. It does price out a lot of families who might take their cousins or other people who may not be into the product and expose them to the product that otherwise wouldn't have been. So it is sad to see it, but it is happening everywhere. And that's just kind of the way the world has been moving.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name's Daryl. Came from Massachusetts and I moved to Wisconsin. And there's a lot of people that might be asking, why go with Conrad? Why go with Supreme Lending? And let me tell you something, brother. I think about the credentials, the tag team partner that I'd be working with. First of all, we got the Podfather himself, Conrad. How can you go wrong with that? And then also go on to SaveWithEric.com, which, you know, who else could have kicked Vince's ass for 83 consecutive weeks? You can't beat that duo right there. But they did bring a secret weapon, and I didn't realize this because this was not advertised. I worked closely with Larry the Axe Thompson. And let me tell you, with all the stress with moving across the country with a large family that I have, it was reassuring to know that I had the enforcer at my back, handling questions from the other side of sellers, the other side with trying to find the right prices. He took care of all that. All I had to do was keep my eye on the prize and make it there to Wisconsin. They were absolutely fantastic. They checked in on me, especially Francis, very patient with me. I don't go through this process all the time, so I trusted the experts. I was able to call them. They called me if they had questions, and it felt like it was a personal arrangement. There was even a point in which, from the seller side, they wanted something else that wasn't part of the norm. Francis straight up told me, hey, we're loyal to you. We'll do whatever you want to do, and we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of. They came through. I made it to the dream. I'm the champion of my own destiny here. They were able to help pave the way for me and my family. I couldn't be more happy with the results. I went from having less than an acre to now 20 acres worth of land. They made that dream a reality. I'm Daryl, and I'm living in Friendship, Wisconsin, in my dream home, thanks to SaveWithConrad.com.
Animal lesson number 212, non-equal housing lender. SaveWithConrad.com.